All right, everyone, thank you for coming today. I'm gonna let Dr. Buchholz introduce our speaker for today.
Thanks everyone for coming. I am happy to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Perotto. He earned, well, okay, so I think he's going to introduce a little bit of his background in the next few slides.
I hope so. I think so, yeah.
He got his Bachelor of Science in Agronomy at the Universidad Mayor de San Simón in Perotto-Baldivieso, Bolivia.
Yep.
Master's in Forestry and a PhD in plant ecology from Texas A&M University. So I think he really kind of spans a lot of what we have in our department as far as expertise. His career has included a lot of experience around the world in academia and in consulting. And he's currently in the Department of Rangeland, Wildlife, and Fisheries Management at Texas A&M University. He's been there since this year.
2 months.
2 months. Previously, he was at A&M Institute. Just as a highlight, he's been part of research teams in the US, the UK, Bolivia, and Puerto Rico with successful outcomes and contributions in the fields of rangeland ecology, wildlife ecology, livestock wildlife interactions, and their integration at multiple temporal and spatial scales. He's currently an associate editor for Journal of Ecological Processes and Rangeland Ecology Management. We first met, I think, in the landscape ecology meeting in Fort Collins.
Yes.
So we've known each other since I was a grad student. His students who went to that conference kind of blew me away with their technological skills. It was just far and away beyond what I knew was even possible to do as a wildlife biologist. And we also have connections. I did my PhD at Texas A&M, where he is now. One of my instructors and committee members was also
My chair.
the chair of his department, Dr. Ben Wu, who's a great landscape ecologist and a really pioneering, I think, instructor of landscape ecology.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited to have Humberto here today to give us a talk. I'll let him talk now.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Let me know when it's time because sometimes I go like, it says 7 o'clock in the morning. So thank you very much. Thank you, Erin, for that introduction. I'd like to say something a little bit about Ben. Ben Wu was my PhD supervisor eons ago, and he's still there. My kids call him Uncle. And that is one of the most wonderful things. I'm an associate professor, and they require me to have a mentor to go to professor at A&M. And after 20 years, I've asked him to be my mentor. So Ben is that kind of person. He's a wonderful human being. He's an impressive ecologist, and he's now advising my daughter to go to the competing university. But that's another story. And that's amazing. My oldest daughter, she's doing journalism at the University of Texas, and which is a major rival for us. So we say it's a house divided right now. But it's wonderful because my daughter calls him, and it's like the second generation there, right? So that's amazing. So Erin talked a little bit about. Yeah, about this. So for the students, if you have plants, toss them away and make another plant, and then toss them away and make another plant. My goal in life was to be a corn breeder. I love corn. You know, corn in tortillas, I grew up in Bolivia and I love corn. I studied agronomy because I love corn. I grew up growing corn, and my life was around corn. Well, 6 months after I finished college, I didn't have a job in corn. I was trying to scramble, build jobs here and there. And somebody said, "Hey, why don't you take a GIS class? This is 1994, 1995. Why don't you take a GIS class?" I'm like, what is GIS? So what is GIS?
Geographical Information System.
Geographic Information Systems, right? Well, 6 months, no job, I got, and I said, well, I don't have the money to go to that training, and they were so desperate to get people. This was the Netherlands cooperation. They were so desperate, Wageningen University, that they decided to pay a stipend for whoever took the course. So they said, well, they're paying. I mean, you know, no questions asked. And I took that course. I became the technical liaison for the Inter-American Development Bank. Went to work for the Inter-American Development Bank, and I was very fortunate to get a Fulbright scholarship to come in 1990. So the GIS part got a new meaning for me, because ever since then, I've been able to have a job where I want. And that's why I tell my students, you need to position yourselves in a place where you say, I choose, and this is what I want to do. So GIS got a new meaning, generous income source. Okay, that's very important. So I did my master's in forestry with Dick Fisher. He passed away a few years back. Great guy. The spooky part about this, I'm sitting in his office today. They gave me his office. And when I saw that, flashback to 1998, when I went into the first building at A&M, and there was this Dr. Fisher who said, welcome to A&M. Okay, I went and I got my PhD in rangeland ecology and management, went to do my postdoc in Puerto Rico, went to the Uvalde Research Station at Texas AgriLife for 2 years, left that, went to the World Bank, worked all around Central America. I was stationed in Bolivia, but I reported to DC. And then one of those things that said, hey, you know what, I'd like you to go to Europe, because I want to go back to Europe. That was from Italy. He left Italy when he was young. And I said that, well, the only option is England, Germany, or the Netherlands. There's no way I'm going to get a job in Italy. Ended up getting a job in the UK, worked there for 5 years. And in 14, I get an email. It says, hey, would you like to come to A&M Kingsley, which is a small campus. I don't know if you've heard about the Cesar Claver Wildlife Research Institute. So they sent me an email and said, would you like to come this way? They made an offer I couldn't refuse. I ended up going down to South Texas. I spent 8 years there. It was a wonderful experience. Got to work with a lot of people. And some time ago, College Station, the mothership, sends an email and a phone call and says, hey, would you like to come this way? Hey. So that's how I did all this. Okay. So if you ask me, none of this was planned. It was organic. It was the passion for the work I do, the kind of things that I like to do that led to be where I am. I'm there for 2 months, and it's been, you know, every time that a change has happened like that. When I got to Kingsville, I thought, this is where I'm planning to retire. I have a few more years, not that much. But then when the A&M opportunity came, I thought, you know what? I think I can do more stuff there. So it's really nice to be able to go back to the university where I got my 2 graduate degree after 20 years, bringing all the experience of working in Australia, working in Spain, working in Guatemala, working all around the world, and being able to teach that to the students. So looking forward to my first GIS class next semester. Those are some of the jobs, and what I'm going to be talking about, I already talked about that, but what I'm going to talk today is a bit about landscape ecology. I'm going to be talking about how in the world landscape ecology has anything to do with cows. And then I'm going to make my case towards the end of that. Okay. So for those who have taken did you explain about this in your landscape ecology class? Or did you talk a little bit about pattern and process? Yeah. All right. Trust me, I'm not going to ask you to count all the squares, but there's the same proportion of forest and pasture. It's the same. Okay. Now, if I ask you, if we say 50-50, is there any difference between these 3 pastures? You know, when you go to the field and the landowner says, how much woody cover do I have? You say 50%, fine. Is there a difference here? and what are the implications?
The continuous landscape, one is patchiness and fragmented,
Okay,
and one is continuous landscape.
yeah, I mean, you're good, very good, you're using some landscape ecology terminology. But if you think a little bit more from the concept point of view, the processes that happen here, here, and here are going to be completely different, correct? This might be great if you have a lot of forest. You have, you have all this patch of forest here, and then you have this pasture. You have a very small amount of edge. Your edge increases as you go to the right. If your edge is increasing, then your probably your core areas increase. The species that are going to be there, the processes that are going to be happening there are going to be very different. Correct? And that goes to the concept of landscape ecology. The reciprocal effects of pattern and process. So you have a pattern, it generates a process. That process changes the landscape, generates a new pattern. Right? So there is a constant process of change going on as the processes, and what kind of processes are we talking about here? Think house. Very simple process. Grazing. Right? Okay. So there's a lot of that happens. When you're learning at landscape ecology, you can talk about deforestation processes. We can talk about human impact. There's all sorts of hydrological processes. If you look at the paper that was written by Ben Wu, Steve Wisner, and Tom Thoreau back in 2001, they really describe with landscape metrics the process of how tiger bush is structured in Africa, and how the hydrological process actually makes that. If you put images every 10 years, you see that tiger bush like moving upwards, and it all has to do with hydrology. I'm not going to go into that, but I suggest you guys, if you have any questions, shoot me an email. I'll send you the paper. It's a really nice paper. Okay. So I love landscape ecology, but I love to work in rangelands. And one of the biggest problems we have in rangelands is invasive grasses. And so the question for me and my research group became like, how can we use landscape ecology to start looking into these grasses? Funny enough, in South Texas, everybody's talking about invasives, but very few people knew how to talk about these invasives. So we started looking at the research, and a lot of that is, wildlife, livestock has negative impacts for negative consequence. Livestock has a negative impact because they spread invasives, and invasives have eventually a negative consequence for wildlife and livestock, and it's kind of true. But there is a history to that. If you go and start looking at the history of grasses, a lot of the grasses that are now in South Texas were brought in the 1940s and 1950s because the economic input for the people who were living there was livestock. They needed grasses in order to maintain their livestock numbers. The whole shift became in late 90s, 2000, everybody decided, oh, let's do wildlife. Suddenly, all those amazing grasses that are there for the livestock become a problem. And now they become a problem because when some of those grasses like tanglehead, and I'll speak about that in a little bit, they can grow when they are in the early stages of growth, they can be very good. We're talking 10-15% fruit cropping. They're great for livestock. But once they grow old, they get brown, the content of protein gets very low, it's very unpalatable, and it removes any desire for cattle to eat that. Okay? So livestock has a problem because they don't like to eat that. On top of that, it creates big monocultures, and when those big monocultures are in place, guess who has problems? Do they hunt here? Bobwhites? Like bobwhites? Yeah, when you have a big, thick monoculture of a grass, that little bobwhite has a problem because they cannot go through. Yeah, we're not talking about, for us, it's here. For the bobwhite, it's a 10-story building. Right, and it gets sick. So it creates problems for grassland birds. And one of the things, everybody's been trying things for the last 15 years. And I think the conclusion in the group is there's not a one solution. This is going to take investment in research, investment in adaptive management, learning how we can use the tools that we have to do that. And some of the tools that are used in management are Pyric herbivory. You've probably seen a lot of the work from Sam Fuhlendorf and Oklahoma. Poncho Ortega is working a lot on that, burning and really putting high stocking rates. And the beauty of that is you burn, you have a new growth, and that new growth is being hammered by cattle. So the invasive stays at check, and other species have the opportunity to go and compete. Herbicides, a lot of that, and I'll talk a little bit about that when it talks with shrub encroachment, which is again another problem because we have species that start encroaching the landscape. And when those species start encroaching the landscape, it not only becomes a functional problem, but it also becomes an economic problem. Fencing. Do you know how much is a mile of fencing? It's a lot of money. Being a rancher is one of the riskiest businesses, as far as I can tell. You have cows, you rely on the rainfall, you rely on your management strategies, and you want your cattle to be doing things in a certain way. So I'll talk a little bit about that because we're developing some virtual fencing strategies to help change some of that in terms of cost. Restoration strategies. Restoration is a big thing these days. We want to restore here a lot of things. So again, there are mixed results about that. So, but nevertheless, these are four of the strategies that we have in livestock. One of the things that we started talking a few years back is why do we use GIS? And why don't we use remote sensing, and why don't we use principles of landscape ecology? And I'm going to be talking a little bit about those things. So we started in 2000. So when I got hired in 2014, I went 8 months to Bolivia, spent some time with the family. The new boss in Kingsville, the director, sent me an email and said, "Can we map tango? So I had to go and do a little bit of literature and say, can you send me some GPS points? So he sends a grad student, takes a bunch of GPS points of these areas of Tanglehead, and I reply back a couple of days later saying, yes, we can map. And that was amazing because then I started seeing a bunch of things about Tanglehead. Turns out that Tanglehead is a native species in Texas. It's supposed to be an increaser according to NRCS, so it's about 5–10% in the landscape. It likes to be in sandy soils, and then it was in Czech about 2010, 2012, where ranchers started having a problem because they would go and cattle would not be using that, and it would create literally oceans of tanglehead. Okay. And I think you can see that picture down here. This is no joke. It takes 45 minutes to go to that tanglehead and walk there. Scary because you're wearing your boots and everything, and you're going like this because you know our rattle is going to show up somewhere. Guys, I don't have a problem with pretty much any species, but snakes are not my thing. I'm super. There's something between me and snakes and that. Anyway, if you want to know the details of what I'm going to talk about in a little bit, with my first student, Jose Mata, published the paper, and it's kind of funny. We're talking about removing an invasives, and Mata also means kills in Spanish, right? So if you want to Google this paper, all you need to do is put Jose Mata Tanglehead, which makes for a nice Spanish sentence there, right? Okay. So, what the question we asked with Jose was, can we map tanglehead using aerial imaging? Okay, we use this model to look at tanglehead configuration over time. In other words, can we start looking at some landscape ecology metrics to start thinking about how tanglehead is operating? Can we integrate data like soils data? Okay. And so what we did is we went 5 locations in South Texas, really nice, savannas with some woody cover there, diversity of soil, but predominance in sandy and loamy sandy soils. And you can see the precipitation. What's the precipitation here? More than in Texas. At least. Yeah. More than in Texas. Okay. I had a chance to drive from Greenwood this morning and the landscape are just, you know, especially once you get off the highway and you start going to those small roads. Okay, so we used the NAIP. You know what NAIP is?
National area.
Program. Very good. So it's those aerial photos that come every 2 years. The US, and trust me guys, when it comes to these things, don't take it for granted. This country is amazing in the fact that it has one of the best historical records of aerial photography in the world. At least there was a guy, Colonel Tobin, in 1937, he had his plane and started taking photos of Texas. There are records of Texas in 1937. Why does that matter? Side story, sorry? You can look at the changes that happened in agriculture pre-pivot systems. Pivot systems were invented in the 50s. You can look at the changes that happened before pivot systems and after pivot systems. Why is that important? I'll talk a little bit about that. Okay. Anyway, these aerial photographies are stitched into something that they're called 7.5-minute quads. If you want to know more about that, go to the USGS. There's a fantastic database that tells you about that. It's really well done. It's done for the continuous US. And the beauty of that is that these photos are always taken during the growing season, which matches with one of the characteristics of tanglehead. And I'll show you that. Sorry, that tanglehead, that's the seed part. It's a reddish black seed area. Gets in the reason why it's called tanglehead, gets entangled on everything, and it's very easy to disperse. Well, if you look at these, this is towards the end of the growing season. There is a reddish color, and that's why we were able to map it. So what we did is we used the NAIP. We derived an API from that NAIP. We merged those, we classified, and then we sent a couple of grad students to collect points. 1,400 and change points. Accuracies over 85%. Pretty good. So the first question was, can we map tanglehead? The answer is yes, yes we can. And that's, so once we did that for 2014, we were able to use the same procedure to get 12, 10, and 8. And that red area that you see, that's tanglehead. Right? The change is obvious. I don't like maps because you can cheat with the eye with maps, right? You can make it look worse than it is or less than it is. So numbers do the trick here. We implement some landscape metrics. So landscape ecologists, what we like to do is we like to, some of us like to do raster maps and look at the edges and start quantifying the age and perimeter and area and things like that. So I'm going to tell you the story with 2 or 3 graphs. See the percentage of land covered, and I'm going to go here. P-land here, this goes up. So first thing, percent of tanglehead cover is going up. Second thing is patch density. If you look at the patch density, high patch density, what does that high patch density mean? Lots of patches, right? Goes down and then starts going up again. Mean patch area. The mean patch area is nothing but the sum of all the patches divided by the total number of patches. So if I have lots of patches and very small patches, that means I have a small mean patch area, that means I have lots of small patches. That changes because that patch density goes down and the mean patch area goes up. So we go back to the images and we start looking at what's happening there. We have a lot of small patches of tanglehead around the edges of the big patches. And as we go 2 years down the road, those small patches coalesce, disappear, and then you have a bigger patch. So cool thing about this, can we look at the configuration of it? The answer is yes, yes, we can, because we learned the mechanism. These metrics help us understand the mechanism of the process that is used by tanglehead to spread in the landscape. It looks like doom and gloom because now they're like, oh my God, this tanglehead is going to invade everything. Well, we cross-referenced this information with soils data, and what we found out is that the soils they prefer are going to be loam sand, sand, and sandy loam. We tested, we looked in other areas with all the classifications we did, and all the tanglehead only happens in these three types of soil. So good news for those who don't have those soils, bad news for those who have, because now we need to start thinking about how we manage. Now we know what the problem is, we can quantify the problem, but now we need to start finding solutions to solve that problem. So with Poncho Ortega, I don't know if you heard of Poncho Ortega. He's a range person with a huge focus on livestock management. We decided to integrate a few tools. We decided to get GPS collars. We decided to start using drones. We decided to use some fire debris and integrate all the information to start managing tanglehead in a practical way. So the way it worked was first we get the drone and we map and we try to assess the amount of biomass or fuel that we're going to have. We have that information. We had this. This is one of my first master students. We were going and painting, and to this day we still use that. We paint orange the area that we're going to then treat and quantify. Then once we have all the data, we burn it, and then we put the GPS collar. And with that, we've got a few really cool resources about that because we were able to get some really good papers. Number one, on how we can quantify forage mass for livestock, how we can quantify tanglehead, how we can manage tanglehead. We've learned that if we burn tanglehead, it's nice fuel, you burn that, you do a prescribed burn, you put cattle on top of it, cattle will prefer to go to those areas. We have a paper right now that we're finishing. With all that GPS data that we have, we were able to go and pretty much select randomly days and then download planet imagery. Yes, has anybody worked with planet imagery? No? Do you know what it is? Surprise, 3-meter resolution, 3, not 30, 3 meter data sample. So on a good month, you can get 17 days of satellite imaging. So we were able to get the NDVI on that day with the GPS collar on that day within the hours that we thought they were crazy. And what we found was really amazing. We compared that to random points, and cattle will go for the greener vegetation. We all know that, but they will go for the tanglehead areas primarily, the burn area. So that's pretty good. So this first exercise that we did with Poncho led to another set of ideas. Can we calculate forage mass, and can we do it systematically in such a way that we can repeat, and get consistent results? Can we quantify mesquite? Why is mesquite a problem? It is and it isn't. It's a brush, and it spreads rapidly, and once you have brush in your grassland, what happens? Less grass, less livestock, less income, right? Remember I told you about shrub encroachment? Well, we've done an analysis of South Texas, and we found that in lots of areas of South Texas, brush is encroaching at a rate of 3% per year. If you have the 100,000 acre plot or pasture or ranch, and you have 3% increase in woody cover, how many acres of woody cover encroachment are we seeing per year? it's 100,000 acres, at 3%. 3,000 acres. I'm going to go cheap on the brush control. Okay, brush control, $100 per acre, 3,000. Suddenly, that brush encroachment became a financial problem for you as a rancher, because to keep in check the amount of grass area that you have, you need to invest $300,000 in removing that brush. So it's not any, I mean, it's obviously it is an ecological problem, it's a function problem, but it also is a huge economic endeavor, whoever is managing that branch. Okay. So that's why we started thinking, well, can we start quantifying this heat? And then, sorry for the type, I should say from, somebody asked me, can we quantify crude protein? That'd be a great idea. Let's try it. And yes, we were able to do it. We're finishing that paper. So all these different ideas got us to this idea. We need to get different sensors. All the work that had been done to that date was just RGB. And so we moved into multispectral, we moved into thermal. And so we started working on thermal ecology, drone aerial surveys, biodiversity, fine scale, landscape structure. So this is the pilot study that we did. That was the formal design that we tried to do to quantify forage mass. Take home message, linear regression. Yes, we can quantify forage. It can be done. The problem was we did it on 4 acres. Pastures down there in South Texas is 3,000 acres, right? Or 2,000 acres. And you're like, the rancher is going to come and say, well, who cares? I mean, you just did 4 acres. Have you done field work trying to estimate, quadrats and things like that? Who has gone? Yeah. How does it work? I'm going to come with a cheeky answer here. You start, 7 o'clock in the morning. Let's do this. 10 o'clock. Oh, it's getting hot. By noon, it's like click go. The data gets. There's this idea that the data may be graded as you go throughout the day. Number of samples depends on a lot of manpower. There's variability between observers. There's a lot of things. And so one of the things that we thought with Coach Ortega was, well, how about we scale up the sampling methodology? So if we are able to get, and we got actually a 3,000 acre plot, and in that 3,000 acre, we were able to fly 20% of the area with the drone, sampling different areas. And with that, we were able to quantify forage. So we have people sampling on the ground, we have people sampling with the drones. The next big question became who's right? Because we had estimations, and so we were comparing estimation from the field with estimation from the drones, with extra samples on the field, extra samples with the drone. And one of the things that just give you the bigger picture of this one is that this is the field data. This is a random sampling method, and this is called sorry, I forgot this. This is the double sampling method. That's a very, very popular method in South Texas, and this is the random. And you can see there are lots of differences. We are not sure whether this is an artifact of the stats or actually it's the variability. But we were able to say, yes, it can be done, but we just need some more information to be able to say a clear and a good yes on that. Anyway, so one of my students comes and says, I want to do the master's with you. Like, okay, what do you want to do? You guys are debating about how to do this and how to do that. Let's do this. I have 2 pastures where we grow hay. We produce hay. And what we can do is we fly the drone before cutting the hay. Like, okay, we cut the hay, we weigh all the bales, and we decide whether the drone works or not. Makes sense, right? Now we're going to have a full measurement of the pasture with all the data. And what we did is we went to two pastures that were available, one with no fertilizer, one with fertilizer. The one on the left was producing about 2,000 pounds per acre. The one on the right about 5,000 pounds per acre. And those are the results. Now I'm going to ask you a question that might be statistically powerful, biologically meaningless. The difference is a bale, less than a bale per acre. Yeah, less than 500 kilograms per acre. You know how much is that in terms of forage? Less than 500 kilograms per acre. It's about this size on the pasture. Less than an inch, maybe an inch and a half. Less than 2 inches, an inch and a half. Do you think that really matters for cattle? So the beauty of that, of what we've done with this by measuring all that, is that yes, the drone can help you actually estimate the total amount of forage. There are some problems, and one of the things that worries us is this one. We don't like to overestimate. What is the problem with overestimating in a livestock operation?
Can't deliver.
Sorry?
Then you can't deliver if you think you're gonna have enough product and you're trying to sell it all.
You think you have these and you stock a little bit higher than what you have there. You could be having problems with your forage. Okay. Problem with this and why this is so important in rangelands. If you manage your cattle the right way, you can have as much livestock and as much forage as you want. The day you overgraze, get ready for 5 to 10 years of painful restoration of your livestock. It takes a long time to, first you need to remove your cattle. And that that pasture needs to rest 3 to 5 years. And if you think about that in terms of a livestock operation, that's a lot of money. Okay? So we did all that work. And this work was tied to bobwhites. And one of my grad students and one of my master students, they come and I say, hey, Humberto, we have an idea. Can we pass it by you? I'm like, yeah, sure. And they showed me this image and they said, what do you see? I'm like, oh, wow, nice rendering. That's not a photo. That's a 3D rendering of the landscape that was taken with the drone. It says, see all these openings, those areas there? Yeah, that's grazed area. See all these short areas there? Yeah, that's grazed area. You know that this is the grazed pasture where we found 38% more bobwhites than in the non-grazed. And I'm like, okay, what's your point? That we could use landscape ecology, to use structure to look at bobwhite habitat and how adaptive grazing can promote the development of wildlife habitat. We can use very high resolution imagery. We can use the 3D because to that point we're using some 3D and a lot of 2D. We can revisit this and we can go back and take as many images as we want, and we can develop time series to see the effect of grazing on bobwhite habitat. Because we can do 20% of the area, we have a much better sampling than walking and trying to measure this in the field. So we found some money. We pitched the idea to a landowner. Landowner loved the idea, and we're finishing the paper on these. But I just wanted to show you kind of the plant here. See that? That's not grazed. Up left there, down left. That's the grazed, and you can see that there's a lot of opening, right? This is a pasture that was a monoculture of trichloris. That trichloris was here. Cattle was able to remove it to a height of about 30 to 40 centimeters. Open those areas, and you can see that the structure is way deep. And if you ask the question, how does that help bobwhite? So the stubble is lower, becomes good habitat for quail. There's a lot of open spaces. Quail can move through the landscape. The resources are there and the numbers are too. Along with these, we've been conducting quail surveys every year. And this pasture that has been managed like that has consistently shown higher number of quail, about 38% every year. The other thing is that, of course, the land manager didn't tell us the whole operation. End of the growing season, gets the cattle out, puts the cattle in the control pasture. And we're like, you know, traditional experiment going down the window. So we asked the landowner, can you keep the cattle in the control for the same time? And so throughout the whole dormant season, we monitor that, and yet at the end of the dormant season, we flew the drone again. Surprise, the graze pasture had not changed. So there was a legacy effect in the pasture, which meant that structure that was modified by livestock was able to stay there for about 4 months. 4 months that, if you think in the scale of a ball white, is fundamental. Okay, and the other one, the one that was the control, after 4 months, we started seeing that structure appearing because the cattle started grazing. Slightly different, and we were a bit surprised, but we went back to the ecology of the species that we were working, and we were working in dormant season. So the placement of the protein, where the green areas are and all that changed. So obviously the behavior of the cattle changed, and some of the patterns that were developed were slightly different. So those are the kind of things that we do with drones, and there is a framework to work behind that. We like to work a lot with kind of the broad scale. So now we're going into the big landscape ecology things. We're talking about the Ogallala. Remember, I talked to you guys, I mentioned the Ogallala at the beginning of the presentation. The Ogallala aquifer is the aquifer that feeds America and potentially the world. Right? That goes dry in Texas, and it's going to be a huge problem. We might be seeing another dust bowl. Projections say that in the next 100 years, the Ogallala aquifer in Texas is going to go dry. So we need to start thinking, and one of the things that we did with Ed Rose, who's a PhD student of mine, we started talking about how using some of the concepts of rangelands, landscape ecology, remote sensing, you can go back and start thinking about strategies, long-term strategies that would help us mitigate some of the potential problems that we might see with that potential drying of the Ogallala. Justin Weed is now doing his PhD at A&M. Justin came to the lab and said, you know, I know I'm doing this remote sensing process, but nobody knows the story about these invasive species. So he took up on his task to do a leak review of the 7 more invasive species in South Texas, and he wrote that publication. And you know, guys, if you're grad students and you have passion for something like that, diving into that. Publishing is, at least to me, is the gold standard of what you're going to do, whether you go to academia, whether you go to the private sector, whether you go to government. And Justin decided and did. Sometimes I had to dig him out of the, you know, I had to go and dive into the rabbit hole and start pulling him out. Like, this is enough. But he wrote one of the most comprehensive stories about how this whole story about invasives is self-inflicted. Okay? And now we are looking at with Jason Lombardi, another grad student, we've been looking at, you know, is there enough ocelot habitat? Because for the longest time, you know, they've been talking about ocelots and how there's not habitat, and it turns out there's a lot of habitat. It's just Texas is 95% private land. So you can choose not to say there's ocelots there, right? So fortunately, the mindset of a lot of the landowners is changing. They are realizing that actually having the ocelot has a lot of benefits. And Cesar Claver is starting a really cool project on ocelots. By the way, if there's anybody who might be interested in working with ocelots in your undergrad programs, there are some opportunities. So just going to the family job board, there might be some opportunities there. I know I'm advertising for another campus, not even mine. Okay. One of the problems is humans, climate change. I mean, I cannot give a presentation without talking briefly about those two, okay? One of the things is bog whites. You've seen all the kind of things that we can do at the pasture level. Through these, we are losing bog whites left and right. If you look at the corridor, if you look at the, go and look at that paper, correlates of habitat fragmentation. If you look at Texas, Texas is getting split into two, probably into four. It's going to become a big checkerboard of bog white habitat, and the populations are declining incredibly. In Louisiana, they're gone pretty much. I mean, and in South Texas, it's the one of the last landscape legacy areas. You could walk on bog whites 40 years ago. There's still a lot of bog white, but the numbers are nowhere near where they were in the 1970s. We're looking at carbon. We were talking yesterday or 2 days ago with people that were thinking about the Tamaulipan thorn straw communities. They were saying, well, how can we get the landowners to buy in the idea of conserving this landscape? Because the species they want to conserve is the scaled quail, which is another species of quail, but they don't have any hunting value. And people don't seem to care much about that. And so we're talking and say, well, why don't you look at carbon? Tamaulipan thorn scrub is biologically very important. It captures a lot of carbon. If you can get the landowners to buy into carbon and actually not use those areas and give them incentives to not use those areas, we can potentially provide that habitat for scale. So it's just finding the right strategies to do conservation. Drones. Climate change is going to affect drones. I know it sounds a little bit funny, I don't know what I'm saying. Technical aspect. Look at the there are two things. Look at the temperature thresholds for operation of drones. It's 118 degrees. When you're out there in South Texas in the middle of the summer, and your temperature sensor is saying 111 degrees, you can expect that drone to be at about 125 out there. The rotors, the temperature, the battery. If it hasn't rained in 6 months, you know that those are lithium-ion batteries, right? It does. If that, and those don't like matches. If that drone falls for some reason in the middle of a flight, and then we're talking about huge fires. Okay, so we need to be careful about that. That's one thing. The other thing is the thermal sensors that we use. If you're using thermal sensors for surveys, this paper, the paper at the bottom was inspired by the fact that we couldn't fly that night. I don't know if you know about drones, but before April 2022, we could not fly it at night. So a lot of the surveys were done as soon as we were with our watches, and as soon as we had the legal time to start, that drone went up and we tried to survey as much. Now we do it at night. But this paper is based on sunrise, sunset temperatures, and the ability, the last 30 years, the temperatures in Texas have gone up by 0.3 centimeters. So in 20 years, if things don't change, and using some models for the next 20 years, about a third of Texas would be limited to fly drone surveys because temperature changes and the impact on the technology that we are using. So that prompts to say we need to build better technology, we need to start conserving our resources more, we need to start thinking about these things. And this applies to everything. This applies to your who goes with iPads to the field to do work? Okay, you might want to change that to a Samsung. Operating temperatures are better. iPads at 95%, they go, and they don't want to work afterwards, right? Did you see that? Yeah. Okay. So some of the new things that we are working on are we need to start integrating the drones with satellite imagery. We want to, one of the things that the Tango had taught us is that the phenological stage matters. We tried an experiment where we tried to classify grass species, and we failed. These are limitations on the drone, sensors. We didn't take into consideration too much phenological states. Management. We want to learn how to incorporate management into remote sensing. If we know what the landowners are doing, then we have a better grasp of how the structure of the landscape is looking. Pattern and process. We need to be more obvious about how we introduce that. And again, land cover trains with pattern and processes. If you think about Texas used to be big ranches, big properties. The level of fragmentation that's happening right now means that if you have 10,000 acres and you sell that in 100-acre ranchettes, now how many ranchettes do you have? 10,000 acres, you're going to have 100 ranchettes. Do you think everybody's going to do the same thing? No, you're creating a heterogeneous mosaic of land use, and that heterogeneity is going to mean something for wildlife species, for hydrological processes. It's a completely new world that we're going to be dealing with. Carbons, I already talked, and virtual nets. And so those are kind of the few lines of thoughts that we're having, where we are moving. I moved 2 months ago to College Station. Those are the new drones that we're going to be using. So we are going to have a Trinity Pro vertical takeoff, pretty cool toy, and we are getting an Alta-X with a LiDAR platform, and that is going to help us understand a lot of the things that I talked a little bit today and do more things. One of the things that I have to say is I don't do this alone. I don't do this just with my grad students. We have a program that's funded by the USDA. It's called the Drone Wave Program, and we've been working with training women to be the next generation of drone pilots. All these students that you see there are FAA licensed. They know how to use their P4D. They know how to do their statistics with drone data. They are into analytics. All of them have gone into grad school. And we're super happy because right now we've already trained 26 pilots. So, between grads and undergrads, we've trained 26 pilots. Most of them, actually, the one that I wanted to go to grad school badly now works for the private sector. Makes a lot of money. And I'm super happy. And the other thing is that we are working with NRCS, again, rangelands. Rangelands are important to us. And you might be working in a pasture, we call it rangelands. And NRCS, guys, just an idea, the next 5-10 years, NRCS is going to be having about 70% of their personnel retired. And their biggest area of concern is range people. People with the capability to talk about pastures, to talk about ecological function in pastures, wildlife, livestock, that kind of stuff. Okay. So we have a program, we have an agreement, we just signed a new agreement with A&M now, where we take undergrads to do a lot of intensive training with plant ID and geospatial technologies. The beauty of that, and they work throughout the year with a professor. At the end of the year, in the summer, they go to an NRCS facility to apply what they have learned. At the end of it, they go to the ESRI conference. And have you heard about ESRI? ArcPro, ArcGIS Pro, ArcMap. Okay. It's a small conference, only 19,000 people. And they do it in San Diego every year. It's about half a mile, 2 or 3 stories high, and just people walking all day long. I love to go to that conference because that's where I do my shopping technology. That's where I see the latest drones, the latest sensors, and all that. But the most important thing is that I have the opportunity to take my students to talk to some iconic people. First person on the left is Dr. Miriam Olivares. She's the GIS director for Yale, for the library at Yale University. She's of Mexican origin. She did her PhD at Texas A&M University. And she's considered one of the most influential women for the 21st century. If you look at the book Women in GIS, in the first volume, she's right there. Okay? And so we went to college together. I use that card because I know, like, hey, Miriam, how are you? I have my students. You have 1 hour, and I feel so privileged to be able to call her or send her a text message, and she gives me 1 hour for my students. And that's gold to me. You know, the second person is Dawn Bright. Have you heard of Dawn Bright? She's another icon, right? She's an amazing person. She's the first African American woman to go and map the deep sea. And you know what? I'm having goosebumps right now because it's like talking to these people is like approaching icons. And so when you hear the presentation, it's just amazing. When you get to go out to the undergrads, hey, look, guys, go out, you know. I'm out here. I go and walk around for about 45 minutes so the students can have a chance to just have an opportunity to chat with them. It's really cool. I also had the opportunity to have Jack Degermon, the owner of Estuary, to be with my students. So really cool experiences. All of this is done thanks to a lot of funding, people who love to fund this kind of work. You know, we have people from private sector, federal government, state government, people who are passionate about conservation. And an amazing group of professors that I've worked with the last 8 years, an amazing group of grad students that I had the opportunity to work with. And I'm very grateful to our landowners in Texas. 95% of Texas is privately owned, and one thing I can tell you about Cesar Claver is that those guys have worked really, really well to create a base of trust with landowners. That is one of the most difficult things to do when you're working the land. And CKWRI has developed a model that is so unique. You go and you see them in action, and they are just amazing. So with that, I think I'm done with my presentation. I'd like to thank you again, more of the pilots there. I'd like to thank you for your time, guys, and I'll be happy to answer questions. Thank you. Yes, sir.
So whenever you were classifying the images, were you using the one built into ArcGIS, or did you use one of the like external deep learning toolboxes?
So deep learning is relatively, be careful how I say this, relatively new. It's probably about 6-8 years that has become more popular. Before that, I've used ERDAS. So I used the typical packages that were or software, ERDAS, NV, Terset. I don't know if you're familiar with those. So I used ERDAS, and we used unsupervised classification. And with unsupervised classification, we were able to get that 85%. I think, and I know where you're going with that, I think that if you start using deep learning today, those classifications could be greatly improved.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I can see the virtual fencing as one of the management measures in the future. So, what is the cost and effectiveness of that in present, and how do the landowners take it? Do they even do virtual fencing?
No, I love that question. Thank you. I was hoping somebody would ask that. It's all about this, right? At the end of the day. And I'm sorry, that sounds very academic, but if you're an owner and you're making you want to meet the end of the day, your bank account, you don't want to have it there. There are several services that offer virtual fencing. $595 for the GPS color plus the service, if your net gain on a cow is going to be $300, you're not going to spend $595 for the GPS color. So it's not easy. Right? Plus, if you are using cellular network, there are costs associated with that. You need to have the towers. If you are deep in South Texas, that may not be the case. So what we are trying to develop is a low-cost virtual fence. Okay, now, there are a couple of things that we've been thinking about that. They offer that if you can go GPS virtual fence for cattle, it's worked really well in the north where the areas are smaller, the return on investment is much higher, and that's mostly for their. What we're trying to do is develop a system based on low frequency, LoRa, and we're trying to put instead of putting permanent fences, what we want to do is put sensors that you can put on the landscape with a, call it sound and engineering, a little block of concrete, a pole and a sensor. So two things: A, you know, the GPS; two, the cattle can see the perimeter of the sensor. And it's just as a cue as they approach, you'll get the cue there. We think we can get that to $50 per year. All big difference, right? Now you're willing to invest if you can do that at 300. Especially if that means that you can manage your grasses better. Because if you can manage your grasses better, the cost, the return on investment increases. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
So we are at 12:15, so if you have to leave, you're welcome to. If you want to stick around and ask Perotto some more questions, we've got the grad student lunch afterwards in this room, so we'll do that. But if we can have one more round of applause, please.
Oh, there were some questions. Where would you recommend starting to learn more about RGIS? So if you want to learn RGIS, the best way to try, and I'm pretty sure you guys have site licenses. You need site license for here. The site license comes with about a few hundred trainings. So you can get access, go talk to your Esri representative on campus. They should be able to give you access to my Esri. And when you get access to my Esri, you can get to the trainings and you can create in your dashboard a learning plan, and then you can take the beauty of that. Every training that you do can be gets a certificate. So you do 6 or 7 trainings, you follow a learning plan, and you can get certification. That's pretty cool. Suggest if you know who the Esri representative is, go and look for them. Get them to sign up. You guys complete the RGIS online in my campus, and then you should be able to get that. Okay. Okay. Hearing and. Recording.
Oh, yeah.